Coming up on Smart Tech today, the old HomePod is dead, so the HomePod Mini can thread. Thank you, Kevin. Just a brilliant intro. We are excited today to talk to Eve's own brand manager, as well as a member of the Thread Group and the Zigbee Alliance, Tim Böth, about everything to do with Thread. Everything to do with what Thread is going to provide for your smart home now and in the future with Project Connected Home over IP. Plus, we've got your news and tips and picks of the week, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of Smart Tech Today is brought to you by SanDisk's Data Storage Solutions. Check out their iXpand Flash Drive Lux or Ultra Dual Drive Lux today and get 15% off your first order of the featured SanDisk products at sandisk.com/smart. And by Itprotv. Expand your skills or launch yourself into a career with IT. Visit itpro.tv/smart for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription. Just use code SMART30 at checkout. Welcome to Smart Tech Today, where we explain the exciting, the dynamic, and the sometimes confusing subject that is the Internet of Things. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I am your other host, Matthew Cassinelli. Hello, Mikah. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. How about you?
I'm excited because it feels like spring here and feel like we're on the eve of great things. So.
Oh my God. Talk about, wow, that was a great segue. Folks, I am very pumped to say that we are joined by an incredible special guest today to talk about something that we've been talking about for quite a while now on Smart Tech Today. But now we've got somebody who knows a thing or two. They are a member of the Thread Group and the Zigbee Alliance, as well as the brand manager for Eve. It's Tim Böth. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
We are so happy to have you here. Thank you for giving us some of your time. Of course, there is a lot to talk about with the introduction of Thread and kind of everything that's involved there. But I think it would be good to start by, because we had, I had a chance to speak to some of the folks over at Eve, and something that actually shocked me, and I feel kind of foolish for having not realized this, but Thread is not just a sort of, it's not sort of a protocol that exists over IP that you can just implement. It does involve some hardware. So could you talk about Thread and specifically about what hardware requirements are involved with Thread? And then we can kind of break into some more nitty-gritty stuff. But I think it should start there because I don't think I'm alone in thinking that it was sort of a firmware-y or software-y type thing where any device could just update the firmware and add Thread if they had Wi-Fi and Bluetooth support.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Actually, we kind of contributed to that situation probably because we do have some devices that will get Thread via a firmware update. But that is only possible because we kind of planned ahead and built in the hardware that is necessary to do that. So taking a step back, Thread is basically a communication protocol that you can use. So it's an alternative to Bluetooth, for example. It's an alternative to using Wi-Fi. And it is IP-based, but it uses basically a different radio technology. And that is actually pretty similar to Zigbee. So the radio support that you usually have for Bluetooth wouldn't necessarily give you the opportunity to just change the firmware and then use Thread with that very same chip. So you kind of need to pay attention what chipset you have as a device vendor, and then since we have been working on this for quite a while, we sort of planned ahead, and that gave us the opportunity to build in those chipsets into products that started to sell as early as last June. And now we can enable thread via a firmware update on those accessories. But generally, if you haven't done that, or we have a bunch of products that don't have that chipset inside just yet, then you basically have a hardware revision with that hardware support for thread.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to ask you too, and perhaps I'm not sure if it's still something that you do, but one of the things that I've been following HomeKit for a long time, and in following HomeKit and paying attention to the different companies that are making different things, Eve always fascinated me because on top of creating really well-designed devices that work with HomeKit and kind of are HomeKit focused, you also understood kind of the backbone of creating devices that were HomeKit enabled, and now, going even further with thread enabled devices. And part of that was Eve Core. Could you maybe talk about Eve Core, what that was or still is, and if that influenced your introduction into thread and, sort of being on the cusp there and making sure that you had thread ready to go when the time came?
Yeah, so that started like really early, actually. So back in the day when HomeKit launched, we were among the first companies to even ship HomeKit enabled products, and we were the first to have Bluetooth enabled HomeKit products. And Bluetooth was really necessary for many device types. So if you have battery powered devices like a door and window sensor, you just can't do that on Wi-Fi because of the power constraint. And so we had that necessity to have battery-enabled devices. But then we also realized that the smart home space was and continues to be a very fast evolving space. And we wanted to build a portfolio of many products. So the natural thing to do that was to sort of have different components that we could change in between. And one of those components is Eve Core, which is a combined chipset that we developed that basically has all the technology we leverage on all of our accessories. So as you may know, our accessories are pretty unique in as they have historical data. So you get a data history for many things that is relevant for a temperature sensor. So you can get your past temperature. That is relevant for a smart plug. So you can monitor your energy consumption, and really many different use cases there. And that is one part that Eve Core can do. And then there's, of course, the whole wireless technology. So Bluetooth radio. And then there's also the certification, HomeKit. It was really strict at the beginning. It got different throughout the past years, but really at the core of HomeKit, you have to have a secure system with authentication and all of that. And all of that combined, rolled into one, is Eve Core, and we utilize this module in many of our products to just make the development in the speed that we have possible, because we are really quick. We were quick back in the day when HomeKit launched, and we continue to be now among the first companies with the largest portfolio of HomeKit over thread products. And Eve Core is really an enabler to do that. So basically, we have developed a new version of Eve Core that also supports thread, and that enables us to move rather quickly here.
Yeah, incredibly quickly. And as you pointed out, and as we've talked about before, Eve kind of being the first that we heard of, or one among the first to offer some real thread use in your home, given that the HomePod Mini was announced and included thread. And then from there, it was about adding devices to your thread network. There was an interesting phrase that you used that I want to pay closer attention to. You said HomeKit over thread. And in looking at different online communities that talk about thread and that talk about home automation in general, there does seem to be kind of a delineation between HomeKit over thread and what those two kind of mean. So I guess what I'm curious about is if there's kind of more of a requirement in order to offer HomeKit products that use Thread for communication versus products that use Thread with just like another Thread border router. Kind of what is basically, can you define HomeKit over Thread versus just Thread in general?
That is actually a really great question, because that really gets to the bottom of what's currently happening here. So generally on this Thread side of things, there is no difference between a HomeKit over Thread accessory and another Thread accessory. Thread really isn't. It's sort of new, but it has been around for a while. As some of you may know, products like Google Nest products have been using Thread for quite some time. Eero routers have Thread functionality built in that you can toggle on and off, and can't really do much anything else with that at the moment. But if you are a developer, you can. So the backbone, the whole Thread thing has been around. And what happened now is that Apple embraced it, and not only like in a small way, they embraced it really in a big way. So of course there is a difference to a HomeKit over Thread accessory now, because the difference is it's a HomeKit accessory with everything that makes HomeKit awesome. The whole Apple reviewing the accessory, making sure it works, certifying the accessory, all of that. That makes it a HomeKit accessory. And that sort of makes that process different. But that also leads to some differences on the Thread side of things, because Thread is just a communication technology ultimately. So if you compare it to Bluetooth, for example, nobody expects that a Bluetooth speaker works with a Bluetooth light bulb and like communicates in any way without having some entity making them talk to each other. So that is true for Thread as well. To make the accessories know that the other accessory exists in the network, somebody has to authenticate them, put them on the network, give them credentials, all of that technical stuff, and then they can form a combined mesh and be more awesome together. So that is why HomeKit over Thread currently is sort of a separate thing, because there's no way the HomePod Mini could talk to a Google Nest device and sort of integrate that. That is just not standardized yet. So that's why currently it's a separate thing, even though many products may use that same technology.
So the Thread technology inside of the HomePod Mini currently just communicates with HomeKit devices that support Thread, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So then when I launch my Eero app on my iPhone and I go and I hit the plus sign, let's see, I'll do a little screen share here. So I tap the plus sign to add a device, and then I choose Thread device, and then it's, gives me the little message about welcome to Thread. And then it asks me to scan a QR code for, some Thread device. Obviously, because I'm curious, I tried using the HomeKit code that's available on the Eve devices I have that support Thread. I tried typing in the little code below the HomeKit code just to see what would happen, if anything. And right now, I can't, connect to those using the Eve app using the Eero app, which in theory would create, I think, another Thread network if it did work. So as a person that's, kind of been curious about Thread for some time, I have found it frustrating that there were these different little rumblings and mumblings about devices that supported Thread, but didn't actually offer me any of the functionality. And so is Apple kind of the first to implement Thread from the sort of border router side of things, where it is offering a way to authenticate and add devices to the Thread network and let them communicate with one another. And that's why right now I can't use my Eero that in theory has that functionality according to the app and some other systems that say they've got Thread built in. I'm not able to access that because folks have not implemented the authentication stuff that you're talking about, correct?
Well, yeah, sort of. So that Eero stuff definitely works right now. There is such a thing that you can use as a developer. I'm not aware of any customer-facing products. There is a Thread QR code that you could scan if you had an accessory that had that, and then that would be a similar process to what you see when you scan a HomeKit QR code in the Home app. But of course, the Eero app doesn't know anything about that HomeKit QR code. That is a HomeKit thing. So it's basically a completely different QR code at that point. But you are definitely right. So Apple really moved ahead here in the game of being the first to implement that border router functionality and actually build an ecosystem for that, an open ecosystem that anyone can join. And on the horizon, and we try to communicate that in our assets as well, this is the first step of something really big, because there is a project that you can read up upon called Project Chip, where companies like Apple and Amazon and Google and Eve, for example, all work together to sort of solve this smart home mess that we're currently in. It has gotten better compared to what we had 5 years ago, where before the Amazon, the Google, the Apple platforms were a big thing that was hugely fragmented. And that improved a lot with basically having the choice of those three major platforms right now. But of course, everybody knows that it's still inferior to having one platform that just works with whatever you want to have. And Thread is at the core of that because it's one of the technologies that will be supported by this project. And as you can see by the implementation in HomeKit today, it clearly is the best technology. It clearly is superior in many areas to everything else that you can use.
Yes. So that brings me to the next thing that, I finally was able to get excited about, because who but Eve came along and said, you know what? I know you've been wanting to play around with your, know more about the Thread network. So we're going to go ahead and include in the app a way to actually view your Thread network, which was exciting for me, just as a person that has these different devices in their home now and wanted to be able to see how they communicated and, sort of what the different devices were. And so let's talk about Eve's, not necessarily the implementation of this, but what these different kinds of devices are, because we've got, what is it? A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that a pentagon? Yeah. A pentagon that's shaded in, and then some pentagons that are not shaded in, and then some devices that have little Z's like sleeping. And I read up on these, but I'd love for our listeners to learn more about the different device types that can exist on a Thread network, where router 38 here is my HomePod Mini, which serves as the router leader most of the time. And then I've got two, I think these are Eve Energy, one Eve Energy plug and two Nanoleaf lights that are also routers. So yeah, could you talk about a router leader versus other routers versus sleeping devices, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a fun terminology. So this is all official Thread terminology, and really as a user, you don't have to worry or care about this. This is why it doesn't appear anywhere. But when we shipped those products and our engineering worked on it, they of course wanted to know, like, what are the connections between the different devices and how do they interoperate, and is that device right now connected via thread, or is it still connected via Bluetooth because it's too far away from my next thread node? And that is why we implemented it. First and foremost, our engineers wanted it. But then we looked at it and said, yeah, of course, there are many other people out there who want to learn about this. So we shipped this in the Eve app, so everybody can take a look if he or she wants to. We also wrote a very extensive blog post. Our engineering actually wrote that, which is available on our blog, where you can go really in depth. But let me offer you a quick overview here. There are two main categories of devices: minimal threat devices and full threat devices. The minimal threat devices are those that you can see in the app with those little Z's, because they can be sleepy end devices. And all of that means those are usually battery-powered devices, and they are just endpoints in your network, because you wouldn't want to have a door and window sensor routing traffic from like all those different accessories in your home. That would kill the battery rather quickly. So that just sits there as an endpoint. And an additional feature of that endpoint can be that it's sleepy. And that really means it sleeps most of the time, which is great for battery life. So it wakes up every 5 seconds in this case, and checks in whether there's anything noteworthy. So for example, if you ask it via HomeKit to identify, it would then get that command. And of course, anytime something happens on the accessory side itself, so when you open a door with a door and window sensor, you don't need to wait 5 seconds. It will wake up immediately and send that command immediately. But really, most of the time when it's just sitting there, it's nice and sleepy and conserves energy. And contrary to that, you have that other group of devices, the full threat devices. And those are what you see as routers in your network. And they are routers in the truest form. You see here an illustration that we have with our Eve Energy smart plugs, for example. They are usually mains powered, and what they can do is they can relay information from other accessories around. So if you have an Eve Aqara far out in your garden, you can just simply place an Eve Energy next to your window, for example, use that for a lamp or something, and automatically it will pass on commands from and to that Eve Aqara to the Home Hub, for example, or to your iPhone. So it's a really, really great way to form a mesh network, because all routers attempt to talk to all other routers. If one router goes down, accessories will just choose the next best route, and it's really magic that just works. So you have already a network with 3 routers. If you turn off the light bulb, for example, with a light switch, I hear that still happens nowadays. Then you don't have to worry about it. It will continue to work, and that's the beauty of Thread with like the mesh routers. So these are really the defining feature here. And then the special case here that you also had with that other icon, you can see in the name that it is designated as a leader. So one of your routers will be the leader of the bunch, and basically has the role to look for exactly these things, to see, is there an accessory, a router that has been turned off? Then I maybe need to reconfigure something here, and maybe some other guy needs to jump in. Or is there a new router here that is way closer to that door and window sensor? Maybe that door and window sensor should talk to that guy. And that is sort of the leader job here. And that is basically just randomly chosen one of your routers that doesn't need any special capabilities to do that. And yeah, I think those are all the types that can be seen in the Eve app and that do exist here.
Yeah. And Matthew, you said you had a question?
Yeah. I was also curious about the partitions, because that sounds like one of the benefits of it as well is that the network can, by it building off of itself, it can expand so much further than the normal limits that most networks have now.
Right. So it grows basically the more accessories you add, but it also gets more stable. So it's not only about extending your reach, but also like within a home to just make it more reliable and rock solid. So if you add an accessory more, unlike any other technology, basically, it doesn't get worse the more you add; it gets better.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. Yeah, it's like for once, as the smart home gets more used, it just gets better, not more complicated and falls apart as you go.
Right, and that is awesome. And one of the things you can happen. Imagine you have like a 3-story home, and you have just on your basement floor you have a bunch of accessories. You don't need anything on the first floor, but then you have another thing in the top floor, and that may be a distance that is just too far away for Thread accessories to connect to each other. So if you have a HomePod Mini at the very bottom and a HomePod Mini at the very top, those will just form separate partitions. So you at that point you have 2 border routers in your home, the one at the top and the one at the bottom, and they will do their thing. Each will build their own Thread network, and they can't talk to each other because they're too far away. And then as soon as you start finding out that you may want to have another Eve Energy on your first floor, and you add that, and suddenly you can connect those 2 partitions, then they will reconfigure to just have 1 border router and 1 giant network. Nice. And again, all of that, like you can't even do anything here. You can observe it with the Eve app. But really, it's fully automatic and magic. And if you remove that Eve Energy, it will just fall back and have 2 partitions again. And really, all of that is just fully automatic without you having to bother.
Nice. That sounds perfect. Especially, I have a HomePod Mini upstairs and downstairs, so it's like that.
Nice.
That spread out there is good.
I think we are just about to the end of the conversation. The one other thing that I kind of wanted to ask you about, of course, Eve has several devices that support Thread. I currently have the Eve Weather, which is, this can go outside and measure humidity and temperature, but it also does kind of weather forecasting based on pressure and all that kind of stuff, which with Eve's platform that has weather trend and history built into it has been really cool. But also just the kind of incredible improvements, the ridiculous improvements to the door and window sensors, because before with Bluetooth, there was latency for sure. And so you might set up automations where you want a light to turn on or turn off, and based on when the door opens or closes. And with Bluetooth, it would happen, but sometimes you'd be tapping your foot before it finally happened. And with Thread, because of the way this all works, I've been absolutely blown away by how these automations work. So I was finally able to turn on an automation I had turned off a long time ago out of frustration that lets me just, when the door opens to the entryway, the lights on the stairs turn on so that walking up the stairs is easier. And of course, you can set that with sunrise and sunset and things like that. Yeah, you mentioned that Eve Aqua is on its way to Thread support. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about kind of what Eve is doing in particular, but also maybe just your excitement and what you're looking forward to in having kind of Thread continue to grow as you have more of an eye kind of on things, being a member of the Thread group and know what's going on? what are some things about Thread that most excite you, and what can we look forward to with Eve that you can share with us, of course?
So I don't even have to answer that as being a member of the Thread group, but just like as a consumer observing the market. I'm incredibly thrilled about more companies joining the party and having Thread accessories in the market. We always had the opinion that the more the merrier. I mean, it's not like a business where you need to like be enemies with every other company, and that's why we liked HomeKit so much, because there are just product categories that we as Eve will never do. In Europe, there is a self-opening and closing window, for example, that exists that is addressable through HomeKit, and just having that work in unison with our products is amazing. And the same will be true for Thread. Having products like the light bulbs that already exist that are not in our portfolio work alongside our door and window sensor and then a smart plug and all of that, and having one giant manufacturer independent smart home network at home. That is a game changer for this, because we've been fiddling around with Wi-Fi here, and then you have Wi-Fi issues and 5 gigahertz, and then you need Bluetooth for battery powered devices, but then you have range issues and need multiple hubs, and then you have some bridge-based devices that use Zigbee, which may be awesome, but only works with that manufacturer. And that is where we are currently. And with Thread, all of that goes away. So a lot of pain just completely goes away. And that will make people like us happy, who already might have a smart home and live with the experiments and problems that have existed. But also for many other people, if it really goes into the direction of just working without you having to master an IT degree, that can just benefit anyone. And that's why I'm so thrilled about Thread and the developments here.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's kind of one of my favorite things about the instruction manual inside of the Eve products. You open it up and it's like, download the app. And that's a great thing too, is you don't even actually have to download the app to add the product to your HomeKit home, but download the app, hit the plus, scan the code, and you're in, you're done. It all takes care of itself after that. It's kind of ridiculous how easy it is in comparison to some of the systems that are out there where, you might have to, I don't know, say a prayer and do a dance in order to get the thing connected and to get it to stay connected. So yeah, I have been surprised and delighted by the reliability of Thread, and getting to play with it so early is, due in part to Eve's products, because you folks have been some of the first to hop in there. So I'm looking forward to those, the remaining portfolio to get Thread over time. And I appreciate you coming and explaining to us here so that we can also kind of disseminate that information about how this is not just a software update. Because I know for a lot of people, they're just like, so when are you going to do that firmware update that gets me Thread? It's like, no, it's not just firmware in some cases if they don't have the right chip. So we appreciate you. Chip, Project Connected Home over IP. Anyway, Tim Böth, thank you so much for joining us here today. And then where's the best place to go to stay updated with what Eve's got in the works? Is it just Eve's website? Our website is awesome. It kind of depends. We are on Twitter. We are still on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We have an amazing blog where we have like a broad range of like more technically inclined topics, but also some use cases. So how you can get ready for summer with Eve Aqua and all that sort of thing. And we'll definitely post updates here as well, because as you have said, we will be moving our whole portfolio to Thread. And that will be many steps to get that done. We have 8 products certified, so we have a bunch of other Eve Energy smart plugs in different regions of the world. They are part of that.
But if you look at our website, there are still some to go, and we can't wait to make them available when they're done.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. While we say goodbye to Tim, I'm going to take a quick break to tell you about SanDisk. That's right, folks. Finding a data storage solution that is compatible across all your devices can be a challenge, but not anymore, thanks to SanDisk's easy-to-use data storage solutions. The 2-in-1 flash drives are the perfect way to back up and transfer your files to other devices. And no matter what device you have, SanDisk has you covered. For Android users with a USB-C port, the Ultra Dual Drive Lux allows you to seamlessly transfer data from your devices to your computers. It's got USB-C on one side, USB-A on the other side. Super easy to use. And then the one I have here, this is the iExpand Flash Drive Lux. It makes it easy to transfer data between your iPhone, your iPad Pro, your Mac computer, and USB-C devices, and even Android devices. Right there, I've got a Lightning connector that I can plug into my iPhone, and immediately the app launches. It starts backing up those photos super quick, and my other, contact information, all the stuff that I want on my phone. It saves it to this drive. Then I flip that switch around, pull off that port, and I've got USB-C. I can plug this into an iPad. I can plug this into my MacBook. I can plug it in anywhere where USB-C is supported and immediately transfer those files if I want to. It is really neat how this software works. It means that you can have a local backup of your data on your device on this nice little flash drive without having to worry about losing that information. I think for anybody who has run into storage problems, they're out of storage, they're trying to take more photos, they can't. 64 gigabytes, 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabytes of space. You plug this in, you back it up, and then you can clean out some of the cruft on your phone, but know you still have a copy of it somewhere if you need to get it. That way, you got plenty of room to take more photos if you want. SanDisk offers the best solutions for backing up and transferring your data. And right now, you can get 15% off your first order of the featured SanDisk products, but only when you go to sandisk.com/smart. That's SanDisk.com/smart, SMART. Thanks so much to SanDisk for sponsoring this week's episode of Smart Tech Today. And now it's time to talk the news. Well, again, first of all, awesome interview, awesome opportunity to get to talk with somebody who knows a thing or 12 about Thread. I think that the magical thing about Thread and something that Tim was talking about is that it just works thing. Sometimes people say that and it doesn't mean anything. They say it just works and then it doesn't just work. This genuinely, as someone who I've got the HomePod Mini and I added these devices to HomeKit, including the Eve Weather. And upon doing so, it immediately started working with Thread. It just did it all on its own. And what that meant was it worked so much faster than I've ever seen anything work. And what I was saying earlier is 100% true. The contact sensor for the door, I've complained before, like I love Eve's aesthetic. I love the sort of Apple-y feel of the devices. But the one thing that was always a trouble for me was the Bluetooth LE connectivity, because if the distance is too vast, if you are wanting automations to happen super quick, all those sorts of things that Bluetooth introduces, those are fixed with Thread. It actually just, it lets you see those things happen as they happen. And so I remember doing a test of having my partner open up the door from the garage that has the contact sensor on it. And I'm upstairs, so 2 floors away next to, the HomePod that sits on my desk. And I texted him and said, open the door at, we count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then he opened the door and immediately I saw the contact sensor say that the door was open. So those automations can actually happen properly. and instead of there being some sort of lag that sometimes then ends up with it not firing off, or if it does fire off, it fires off so much later on. So I really am impressed with Thread so far, and I'm looking forward to, I think as both Tim said and I have said, I'm looking forward to more devices adding Thread support, just so we can kind of see the different processes that are involved with setting up those devices. Because Apple, like, despite the fact that there are some systems that offer support, like Eero with Thread built in, there's still no way to add Thread devices to my Eero. I can only do that with the HomePod Mini via HomeKit. So Apple really got there, and kudos to them for doing that. And kudos to the device makers who have made some cool stuff.
I like too that just that Eve is, I mean, I guess he said they're not exactly competition, but just that he's excited for other companies to do it just because it makes the whole ecosystem better, which is just like, good guys at Eve, kind of not just like screw everyone else or something like that. So, and of course we got a good P-choip mention in there. Actually,
I kind of got a little bashful whenever he said chip, because as listeners of the show know, I have always, well, not even jokingly, that's how it was said first, Project Connected Home over IP. What do you do when you take the first letters? P, C, H, O, I, P. P-choip. But alas,
you're so convinced.
That's because that's what it is.
Yeah. I remember I was like, oh yeah, chip. And you're like, no, it's P-choip. I was like, it's definitely not P-choip.
So some people apparently just lose the word project because they want it to be gone. And then understandably, a word like over can be lowercase. And so it's like US, you don't say USOA, you say United States of America, USA. Right. So I'm okay with O being this like excluded, chip. But then that still makes it P-chip. But I guess some people have said it's, moved past being a project. Now it's just the connected home over IP. But if you say project connected home over IP and then you just say chip, then that's a chip on my shoulder is how I feel about that. All right, let's move on to talk about the news. The first thing is I was kind of interested to see that not only has Amazon introduced a new badge for Works with ALEXA, which is the badge that device manufacturers can use to say, hey, this product works with our virtual assistant, ALEXA, but there are also some changes to the requirements. So if device manufacturers want to advertise that they work with ALEXA and they want to wear that badge, beginning in November of this year, here's the criteria on top of other things as well. But they will need this. So app-to-app account linking says if your product requires a mobile app for setup, WWA will require implementation of app-to-app account linking from your own native app to the ALEXA app. This account linking experience reduces the number of steps required by the customer to start using your skill and can eliminate the need for them to re-enter their account credentials. Nice. So the idea there is that if you log in one account to connect to ALEXA, then it needs to work within the actual app itself, or in the ALEXA app as well. So they show a little page that shows you display an account linking option in your app. Then you enable universal links or app links for your app. And then you configure the skill to use app-to-app account linking. So basically the developer goes and sets up a thing called universal link or app link. And then at runtime, it gets the user's Amazon authorization code, exchange the authorization code for a token, enable the skill and complete account linking. And then at that point, that access token is usable within the developer's app, but also because of the way that it's set up, it will work just in the ALEXA app automatically. So I like that because it means that if I'm setting something up with ALEXA, I don't have to log in two different places to get it working. Required discovery attributes. It says the discovery attributes of manufacturer and model will now be required in your discovery response event for all WWA devices. The additional attributes object will need to include your product's manufacturer name and model number. So I guess up to this point, the device didn't have to include that information whenever it was doing setting up like a discovery. So you plug it in, it goes into discovery mode, and the ALEXA app can connect with it. Up to this point, the manufacturer and model number were not necessary as part of the attributes, which is kind of troubling, but I'm glad that that's going to be a requirement going forward. Interesting.
It looks like just the works with ALEXA. You always say that more than I do, so I can never say it as fast as you. But just the badge itself is rebranded, and I was just looking because they used to have their little. It's supposed to be like a little voice chat icon for ALEXA, and it actually even looks like on the social channels for it, they've rebranded it to be it looks like the Amazon logo with the little swoop underneath and stuff like that too. So I feel like we probably will see a larger Amazon rebrand towards that, because it does make sense that I don't think about Echoes almost ever. I think about the smart assistant. And so that's especially as
a lot of people call it that.
What?
A lot of people call the device that instead of calling
exactly.
Yeah, they call it ALEXA instead of calling it an Echo. The last thing is that devices that are video enabled will, if they want to show works with ALEXA, then they will need to use what's called a video skill kit. It's just, think of it like if you're familiar with iOS, it's like AR kit for iOS, or if you're familiar with Android, it's like AR. What is theirs called? No, I can't remember. But AR Google has its own. Yeah, AR Core. I think that's right. This is like that. And basically it lets customers control the entire video experience using an ALEXA device. So think of it for set-top box manufacturers, gaming console manufacturers, and smart TV manufacturers. By adopting the video skill kit, then you will be able to use an Echo of some sort or any ALEXA device to control the television and do it in a way that's not, sort of hacky. It'll actually just work because it's built on the defaults that Amazon has enabled. So yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like a general trend that with the Nest Hub and that being more available is just video in the smart home becoming more accessible. I mean, that sounds more like just a wide way to control those devices. Like I want that for iOS better because you can do some of that with Apple TV, but just being able to control every part of the experience. But even just a larger trend with the newest Echo and stuff like that is just the screens in more places than you would expect before. So I guess I'll get to that too later when there is some Apple rumors there too. But the other, that's vehicle skills, also looks cool. That's the next story, right?
Yeah. So this is just a new API that makes it easier for companies who are creating vehicles that are connected with ALEXA to be able to do, and I think this is even custom skills too, because I know several companies are kind of trying to make it work. So this is kind of what we see. Custom skills also require the customer to use the skill name to invoke it. For example, ALEXA, ask, Honda to start my car, which creates additional friction. The new connected vehicle skills API was developed to enhance the experience for both developers and customers. So instead of me saying, hey, friend, start my car by talking to, whatever skill, it will be much better at just understanding what it needs. So it says CVSA also includes advanced capabilities such as PIN-based authentication, support for multiple vehicles, automated disambiguation. So an example of that would be, which vehicle would you like to unlock? And deferred responses and notifications in situations where ALEXA has to wait for the vehicle to respond before continuing. So sometimes it would time out before, whereas this will keep it from doing it. That also means that folks who have specialized capabilities, so dealers, appointments, owners' manuals, and all those kinds of things for brands that already have some of these capabilities, they'll be able to combine those systems with this new API to make it a lot easier to use these features. So all it does in the end, the important thing is that in the end, it's going to be a consistent experience for the user who's trying to make it work. So this is an idea. It says this starts with providing name-free skill invocation, allowing customers to make frictionless requests. Instead of saying ALEXA, ask Honda to start my car, you can just say ALEXA, start my car. And then it's going to know what you're talking about. Then you could also say my truck, my SUV, my Rogue. Then you can also give nicknames to your vehicles. So you can say start Wyatt's truck. And then if authentication is required, then it will work with a PIN. But what's kind of cool is instead of having to go start Wyatt's truck and then it goes, what is your PIN? You can just say start Wyatt's truck with PIN 5793, and then it will do that all at once, which is really nice. You're not doing this back and forth to get it working if you want to use this. Apparently Nissan is the first company that's going to be taking advantage of this. Various models year 2016 and later that have Nissan Connect services will be able to use this. So even if the car itself does not necessarily have ALEXA built in, if a video automobile manufacturer creates a skill that works with its built-in connected vehicle stuff, then you could end up being able to, regardless of your car, if it has that feature, you could set up a skill that lets you start your car using your Echo devices. So just simplification is nice, right?
Yeah. I've got like a Subaru and I don't think I pay for it anymore, but they have a Starlink service. So that I was literally about to make a joke that it's like, looking forward to using this 7 years from now once it's been out for 5 years and I need a car or something. But if it can connect in through those existing like OnStar type systems, that's cool. That makes a lot of sense. That is neat. That actually does bring that closer than just like connected cars seem further out, even though we've got some stuff there. Just it actually being able to turn on and stuff, that's pretty neat. Ooh, now I want it. Because I had that and I think you had to like open the Subaru app and then turn it on, and I never really did that. And of course I would want shortcuts, but all the voice stuff too is even better. Nice. Cool.
Tell me about this next thing, because I've had to do this in the past and it sounds like you had to as well. But then I also want you to tell me, oh no. Okay. That'll be after the break. Okay. We'll talk about that after the break. You mentioned shortcuts and then I remembered that you have a thing you want to say about shortcuts. So I'm looking forward to that, but yes, tell me about fixing your ALEXA smart home first.
Yeah. I mean, this article just was the reference because I remembered that I just went through this and it's always helpful. But the article was from CNET saying to nuke your Amazon Echo, let's say smart home, to get rid of ghost devices, because their issue was once you start unplugging, like after a while, once you have a network and you unplug something or it doesn't get updated, it will just kind of be orphaned on the network and you never know what's going on. And so this is just a quick step-by-step guide of how to actually remove all of the devices and add them again, because sometimes you will have to do this. And my similar story was that I've been having issues with Apple Watch reminders for probably 6 months, and even the groceries in reminders for I think the last year, which is bad because I will say this is one of those pandemic things that I was like, I don't have the capability to deal with this because it just doesn't work. I can't really fix it. And I always made the mistake, it turns out, of every time I reset my Apple Watch, I was restoring it from backup. And so it basically was restoring the issue every single time. And so I nuked my Apple Watch and that actually cleared up my reminders problem, which is immediately I was like, oh yeah, I'm just remembering to do stuff now and I can use it on my watch. It it's always been a core part of how I use my Apple Watch. And so just having that back is like, I'm my full technology self again because of that. But the reminders thing in the same way, what was even funnier was it turned out that it was my girlfriend's phone that had the issue. And of course, I couldn't figure that out because it was happening on her phone. So I would always reset my reminders in iCloud, and it just never, anytime she added something to the list, it would never go to mine. And when I talked to Apple support, they finally helped me. Like, they're like, why don't you try it on hers? So she did it, and then it finally works. And so now it's like, I haven't been able to add reminders. And if I did add them, it wouldn't sync only the grocery list. But now it's all resolved. And so sometimes it is just the solution. If you really are getting stuck and have phantom problems, you will spend more time troubleshooting it than it would have taken to just reset the entire network or your device. So sometimes that is the only solution, but just want to give that advice if you are struggling with that.
Yep. I've had to, I remember my Philips Hue system linked with AliXA ended up causing a bunch of issues. And so I had to completely remove everything to get rid of all of the ghost devices and redo it all over again. And that had been part of the reason why I didn't really go through the process of setting it up again whenever I moved here. I use AliXA for timers and things like that, but I haven't really used it as a smart home control system. Because as I've mentioned before, I'm more of a button pusher than a voice talker. Voice talker? Sure. But it was compounded by the fact that I knew that I'd have to go through and do that process again and didn't really want to. So I just sort of let it go because it can be kind of complicated to do.
I like button pusher as a pejorative or just like a jab. You button pusher.
You button
like
pusher.
pusher.
You silly button
good.
pusher. That's me. Let's see. Should we? Yeah, let's take a quick break. And then we'll come back with some more news, including some frustration that perhaps my co-host has experienced due to some stuff and things. This episode of Smart Tech Today, folks, is brought to you by Itprotv. Look, there's no shortage of online platforms that enable users to brush up on their IT skills or learn new ones. With 7 studios, as well as fun and entertaining edutainers, as they call themselves, Itprotv is the best one for IT training, the best platform. One of the most important aspects of IT, turns out, it's cybersecurity. You probably already knew that. Businesses can be vulnerable and need strong IT leadership to combat threats so that businesses can set themselves up for success. The best way for businesses to achieve this is by keeping up with industry trends and strengthening the skills of IT leadership. The Itprotv business platform has been developed from the ground up to support online IT training for both IT leaders and employees. It's part of the ACI learning portfolio of audit, cyber, and IT learning solutions for consumers and enterprises. You can access more than 5,800 hours of engaging video training online and on demand. It offers courses on malware detection, cryptography, penetration testing, end user security awareness, and, well, a whole lot more too. Individuals can also launch or advance their careers in the cybersecurity realm. Itprotv is the only official video training partner for CompTIA, so you know you're in the right place for getting the right certifications. By the way, March is Cisco month at Itprotv. They'll be featuring their 12 Cisco courses, including CCNA, CCNP, CCT, Encore, SLED, and NRC. Check out their webinar with Cisco award-winning David Bombal. It's called Get Hands-On with Cisco and is available now on demand at itpro.tv/webinars. For more insight about IT, check out their podcast Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring industry guests and IT news recaps for a deeper dive into the IT realm. Itprotv is also helping communities. Last year, they served 30 plus COVID-impacted educational institutions with free training. With more than 225,000 members, you know they will have the knowledge and support you need to further your IT career. Go to itpro.tv/smart. I love that. And use code SMART30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/smart and use code SMART30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. Itprotv, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. Thanks so much to Itprotv for sponsoring this week's episode of Smart Tech Today. All right, Matthew, I would like you to share a shortcut with me, preferably one you've had for a long time. And I'd like for that shortcut to work. Does it work now?
No, it does not. The joke that Mikah is making is that sometime last night, what is time anymore? Somebody discovered that every single link to shortcuts that have been shared online through iCloud prior to like last Thursday or something like that, it would no longer work. If you clicked on it, it would take you into the gallery and say this shortcut cannot be found. And naturally, I didn't like that. Federico Vitici of Mac Stories was not very happy about this either because, and in many cases, every single shortcut that had ever been shared was now currently not accessible, which is also the only way to back up shortcuts, which Apple has removed in earlier versions, local backups.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait. Did you say there are no local backups of your shortcuts?
Unless it's installed in your app, you have to share it to iCloud in order to create a copy. And if you drag the .shortcut file out and try to reinstall it, it won't work. There is like a workaround to reinstall them, but it basically, from the way that
for the average user, for Mikah Sargent, I guess I'm not the average user, dang it. Okay, for Mikah Sargent who doesn't have the time to do workarounds, when I back up my phone at night automatically, it's not backing up my shortcuts.
They're not local files. They're all synced through iClouds or through iCloud sync. So like if you reinstall your phone, it would come back from Apple servers. And this was more if I share a link to you and it has an iCloud.com link, when you go to click on that link no longer works. But basically, in effect, the combination of those two things meant that nobody has any local backups of shortcuts that they no longer have installed. Like if I've shared thousands of shortcuts and I recently just rebuilt my library to be a smaller set of 100 shortcuts. And so all 1,000 of those links that I've shared before were no longer working. And pretty much for people like Federico and I, you don't have a copy of every single one of them anymore. And so like you'd either have to go recreate them from scratch or have a copy and share it and replace the links. Even just the amount of work alone was crummy, and I created other downstream issues trying to fix up my website. And it was down for like 12 hours straight because I removed hundreds of shortcuts posts because I still don't know whether they're going to be fully restored. I will definitely say like I was a little bit more scared than ultimately it's not lost, but it still is a really, really bad situation for the shortcuts community, particularly because there's been so many issues with shortcuts since it launched, and it's been an almost persistent thing that we're all really trying to share about it, but on some level, some sort of thing will get in the way and kind of undercut just the potential of it. And so seeing shortcuts have this like such major instability, and for what lasted over 12 hours, like Federico tweeted, or I think it was 24 hours at the time, that it's like, this is not being resolved and we don't know what's happening. And so Apple PR actually reached out or Apple sent a statement saying to me and Federico, being like, we are actively looking into this and and trying to resolve it. So that's good news, at least, because it really is. I don't know. I am almost one of the biggest advocates for shortcuts, but at the same time, there's constantly problems like this. And we have to raise the flags when there's issues like this, because it's it's like the entire subreddit would have been worthless. Anything that anyone had ever shared was just no longer available. And just the amount of work that we'd already have to put in, and just this being the end, or not the end, but yet another point in how shortcuts is not getting enough attention or being supported or having the reliability that any sort of Apple product should have, has made this just be like, what is going on? And so, I mean, I was definitely tweeting enthusiastically about this, but it's also because the situation warranted it, because it really is in many. I mean, I was saying it's dumb that I have all of my eggs in one basket. Thank God we have Smart Tech Today or something, because it is, if people really stop trusting shortcuts, this is something that I've invested years and years into, and people invest a ton of effort into. And I see many people who have just given up because of problems like this. And so it can, sometimes stuff like this can grow beyond what, even if it does get all fixed, people might just never trust shortcuts again. And then that can just be the end of the product. And so I don't want to see Apple let stuff like this happen. And I want to see a continued commitment from them with shortcuts, both publicly and through statements like this. That was a very good reassurance that they're doing something about it. Like, obviously they are, but when it's Apple, you are just sitting there waiting, and like my business was pulled out from underneath me in the meantime. So not a great situation, but it is slowly being resolved now. And I still want to see more commitment from them in the future, because it has been over 3 years since Shortcuts is launched, and it still feels like I'm making excuses for why it's not ready yet. And I don't understand what's going on. So that's a whole rant there.
I mean,
do you have any thoughts, or I don't know?
No, like, yes, of course. Like that's awful. It's awful that happened. It's awful that it resulted in kind of a lot of people scrambling to try and figure out what they needed to do to fix that, and some anxiety about previous versions and previous shortcuts not loading. Because you're right. I think that people only have so much trust that it's not even, I think I know, people only have so much trust that they are willing to give out to anything, and so much work that they're willing to do for any given thing. And so when you run the risk of losing someone's trust and also causing them to do more work to keep things working, and then as this story spreads and kind of goes out and people hear about it and it gets twisted and changed in ways that suggests something other than what actually happened, that maybe it was worse than it was or whatever, then less people are likely to use it, or fewer people are likely to use it than would otherwise. And I think that, you know, that the point that you made there about, you're a big advocate for this thing, for shortcuts in general. There's still a large swath of people who don't use shortcuts at all, who don't ever open that app on their phone, and who, when they hear the people who they know who do use shortcuts talk about this kind of thing, probably pushes them a little bit further away from wanting to use it. And so I think that there's damage done. And because of that, I think that that's kind of how, that's why I feel bad about it, is because
that's definitely like central to my struggle too, because like ethically, I have to tell you that this is the case. I can't just be like, this is all fine and come sign up for my membership, because it is, I'm like taking your money or things like that too. And just that relationship is like, I have to be honest about where this is and where it should be at this point as well, because I feel like I've had a lot of goodwill towards it, and it's not like something that I'm choosing to burn, but I've been burned so many times by it too. And it's still, by like everything that I believe about it is still true. I think a lot of this is fixable. I just don't understand why a company like Apple, and the scale that they have and the quality that they put out with everything else, isn't met in this territory. And it does just feed into the larger narrative of things like Siri, and them that just being kind of a joke or something like that, where this could have been a turning point. And Instead, they're putting these marks in their own narrative. It's not like, I don't know, like this, it does just shake that trust. And so I totally understand if, like, that's why it's like on some part, I don't know, if in a fully selfish way, I would almost not tell you about this because I want you to keep using shortcuts because it matters to my business. But ultimately, like, I have to let people know that these are major issues, and it concerns me when those things, I was already concerned before this happened. And so that's why this is like, how are so many things going wrong with shortcuts before Apple even tells people what's going right with shortcuts? And so they need to make that sort of public commitment to this platform soon, because it's not clear I was writing this somewhere else, but just like they just killed the HomePod and things like that. So we're in a realm where Apple lets stuff languish on the vine and then kills it. And then they're like, why did that go wrong? And it's like, you can do something about it now and put the resources in for, especially, I know that my team deserves it because they are so smart and things like that. And this product can be so powerful. And it is a shame to see these kind of issues plaguing it, because it does rock the foundation. And I have to be honest with people that is like a fair feeling to be feeling right now. So I'm glad that they at least made a statement, because that doesn't happen a lot. And so that is like, they literally told me specifically, which made me feel better at least. So I'm just like, oh, okay, thanks, Apple.
Yeah, that is good. That you at least you got to hear from them. All right, let us move on to our next topic, which is about a speaker or two that we have in our homes. So this originally comes from Bloomberg, who spoke with iFixit. If we could find that original article instead of Gizmodo. Sure. In it, the HomePod Mini, Bloomberg got in touch with iFixit and said, hey, we heard this thing about a sensor that's inside of the HomePod Mini. Could you look into this? And so iFixit looked into it, literally. And inside they found a Texas Instruments sensor that detects humidity and temperature. Now, this sensor is right next to the power outlet, kind of facing out toward the external portion of, like, it's facing outward. It's not as if it's near the built-in power supply or something like that. So the original, conversation was around whether this was just something that, and I still wonder too, if it's like some people are going to put these in their bathrooms, and in their bathrooms, they might be running a shower. And so then it gets steamy and it gets hot. And then the device says, hey, I really can't do anything right now because it's steamy and hot, and that's not great for electricity. So I'm just going to shut off. Bye. Or if this is a secret sensor that will be enabled at some point to make your HomePod Mini a sensor, like a room sensor for your smart home. I'm curious what you think, Matthew, if you think that this is a way to add room sensing technology, or if it's just a sensor that helps Apple keep people from blasting away their HomePod Minis in the shower.
Yeah, that does sound like a logical reason to have it, just like the temperature controls when your phone gets left out in the sun or something like that. I guess my first reaction was, I always try to catch myself because I know that I somewhat have a bias towards Apple, maybe, although some rants, I don't always think everything's great over there. But my first reaction was like, oh, this is a product that has a sensor in it that I own and wasn't told about. And that, when we had heard about that in the past from companies like Google, although usually a microphone is a little bit different than humidity, we criticize them a lot because that is very weird to sell somebody a product and then turn on a feature that they didn't know was there and detects the environment around them. If it is as simple as that charger thing, I think that's fine. I think it also would be great if the HomePod Mini could do that kind of detection itself and that being a HomeKit capability and everything would go a long way, or would be a great way to improve the product. I think it is just a little odd that it's in there and they didn't talk about it. And I didn't realize it was that tiny. Also, there's a comparison on Bloomberg's page where it's next to an SD card and it's very, very small. So, I mean, I have no idea what size matters with these types of sensors too. So this is kind of a weird in between. I'm also just fascinated that nobody mentioned it before this. Like, didn't iFixit already tear down the HomePod and just didn't?
No, they didn't. That was the weird thing. They never did a HomePod Mini teardown. I was looking for one ever since the HomePod Mini was announced, and they never did it. And even still, if you go to their site, the only teardown they have for the HomePod Mini, it's just a link to this Bloomberg article. So for some reason, they just never bought a HomePod Mini and tore it down. They tore down the AirPods
that's very
Max.
Interesting.
But,
I wonder if they are like, I don't know, maybe that's like why or something.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's a little odd. Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think normally we don't like to actually talk about rumors, and even the next story is also going to be a rumor. But I thought it was worth mentioning as well. But I do think it's just kind of an interesting thing to see. And I wanted to bring up that point about how normally, I don't know, like it'd be easy to give Apple a pass, but it is just odd to have a product like that, specifically with a hardware sensor that comes into play later. So it makes me a little uncomfortable, but it is, the microphone thing is a whole different story than just like, oh no, now Apple can tell how humid it is in my house.
Yeah, but I definitely agree. I mean, let's go to, let's see, apple.com, and we'll click on music, and we'll click on HomePod Mini, and then we'll go to tech specs, and we'll scroll down. Audio technology, full range driver, dual passive radiators, acoustic waveguide, transparent fabric.
Although
audio sources, no. Touch controls.
It says relative humidity.
Where?
It's an electrical requirement.
Oh, yeah, but not. So wireless, it's 802.11 and Wi-Fi, direct guest access, Bluetooth 5, ultra wideband chip and thread. System requirements in the box. Yeah, there's no mention of a sensor versus other devices which talk about all other specs that Apple has, which talk about the sensors that are inside of the device. Because even on the iPhone, it even talks about the accelerometer and the GPS and all that stuff. And they mention the ultra wideband chip. So for them to not mention a sensor that's inside of it is troubling in the same way.
I'm curious though, the fact that it has the relative humidity requirements sounds like
they all do. They all say that. Okay, any device has certain requirements for temperature and humidity.
And sometimes I will say it's somewhat worth acknowledging the larger context that Apple and Bloomberg don't have the best relationship, and they are a lot of the places where stories get leaked. Or also there was a major story, I think, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where Bloomberg reported secret chips being in Apple devices that were nowhere else corroborated, and Apple completely denied the entire story. And it sort of seems like a bad mark on Bloomberg. So this a little bit feels like it's like, oh, there's a chip in an Apple product that they're secretly hiding, and maybe or maybe not, it could be a thing. So I think that's just at least my like context as someone who's observed the media for a while. So we could be like playing into that game if they're playing it. But
yeah, I mean,
that's always harder
I disagree. I don't think they contacted iFixit, and iFixit literally unless we just don't trust iFixit or Bloomberg. They pulled this thing out.
Saying, but I don't know. That is like part of the just like knee-jerk reaction, or even the story written about the story that can kind of spread throughout the place. So I'm just trying to like contextualize.
This shouldn't be about more than the fact that there is a temperature and humidity sensor inside of the HomePod Mini, and that on its own is interesting because Apple has not mentioned it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, because I'm on the iPhone 12 Pro page right now, and I'm under environmental requirements, and it says operating ambient temperature, non-operating temperature, relative humidity, operating altitude. Like that's listed on every single device. So that's nothing special.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it also has the SIM card that's built in listed here. It's got all of the sensors: Face ID, LiDAR scanner, barometer, 3-axis gyro, accelerometer, proximity sensor, ambient light sensor. It's got everything that you need to know about MagSafe, including the magnet array, the alignment magnet, the accessory identification NFC, and the magnetometer. It's got all the information about power and battery. Like everything is listed here that's inside of that iPhone. And in fact, it was partially why we knew about ultra wideband in the HomePod Mini and the latest edition of the Apple Watch, is because Apple always lists those sensors in its specs on the site, even if it doesn't get a mention on stage. So why does this one device not have a sensor that's inside of it? Why is it not listed as part of the tech specs when every other device has all of the sensors that are inside listed? It does feel dishonest.
Couldn't that, but if it's, I think that is only if it's true that this is a HomeKit type sensor, or whether or not it's HomeKit is irrelevant, but just like if it's being used for a feature in the future versus it just being part of the product as a way to prevent it from damaging itself. If it is just part of the product to be a way of damaging itself, I think this is kind of a non-story. But I think if it is a hidden version of a capability that's going to come to the HomePod Mini, then I think it is more relevant.
Interesting
that they haven't disclosed this to you but sold it to you.
Yeah, because I guess it's kind of a electronic version of the little stickers they put inside of iPhones that can, when they get wet, they change color so that somebody can see if there's water damage. I guess though, I still have a problem with it though, because it's an electronic sensor, which means that my electricity that I pay for is going, like I'm trying to logic this out to the absolute, why I'm not bothered by a sticker that changes color versus an actual chip. It's my electricity going to power this device, which I don't care if it's 0.00002 cents kilowatt hours or whatever. Like I am powering this thing that is going to be used to tell Apple that I did something that broke the device. Then tell me in the terms of service or something. And I'd love to know, I want somebody to take apart or retake apart a HomePod. Maybe I need to look at the HomePod thing and see if they found anything else inside of the HomePod that could also be a little temperature and humidity sensor. I'm sure they would, iFixit would have mentioned it, just because
I would sort of assume people wouldn't put a big HomePod in their bathroom in the same way that you might be.
You know what assuming does.
You probably would want to put your HomePod Mini there just because it's a giant speaker, or I don't know. I think it's also, I think what Apple puts on their tech specs page is as much marketing as it is documentation. Like they don't document every single part that they put into these. And so I think that's why what's listed there is a function of whether or not it becomes a feature versus if it's just a technical aspect of the product that doesn't need to be disclosed.
Maybe if it was part of the motherboard, I would not be as bothered by it, but it's a separate sensor in a separate place on the in the product. It's not like it's part of the system on a chip, because I agree with you with that. If it's part of the system in a chip package, like you get with the Apple Watch, where they're not going to say this is a semiconductor and a transistor and this is this and this, but it's this is part of the power cord. I partially agree with you. I partially disagree with you. Ultimately, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is something that we do agree on, where it's not a good look to add something to a device and not tell us about it, and then later tell us about it. To be like, oh, by the way, that thing that you bought before, we also put this inside. And yes, a camera or a microphone is worse, but still.
That seems like a smart home ethics thing. That
yes,
on a high level.
And it's why I notoriously take apart devices to see what all is inside of them, and make sure there's not something creepy, because that time that I did that, and then it turned out there was a microphone inside. I never thought I had to take apart Apple's devices to see if there's anything creepy inside. I didn't tell Tim this, but I took apart some of the Eve devices I had because I wanted to see the Eve Aqua supports Thread, but not yet because there's a firmware update rolling out. And I wanted to make sure that I had that correct. And so took it apart and looked at the chip and then saw that it did have a Thread radio built into it. And I didn't see anything else in there that was creepy. So anything that was creepy, I should say, not anything else, because the Thread radio is not creepy. So like I typically do take things apart to make sure that it is what it says it is and nothing more. I didn't think I had to do that with the HomePod Mini, but that is kind of strange that there's a sensor in there that we didn't know about.
We'll see as what goes on with it in the future and then kind of revisit this. So,
yep. Tell me about this next thing, because there are rumors that Apple in getting this, I'm kind of frustrated with myself, Matthew. I've got to tell you, because I was so blinded by, I shouldn't say that. I was so distracted by the idea of having a, what is the word for it? A sound bar that had an Apple TV built into it, that I didn't think of the more obvious product that could exist, which was a HomePod with a display like you get with the Nest Hub Max or the or Echo Show devices. How did I not think of those? Why did I not think of those? I don't know. But there have been some rumors and also some kind of code digging, code spelunking that could potentially point to, and I hope it doesn't look like it does in this Mac Rumors article, because that looks terrible.
Address that too.
Just atrocious. But Apple is adding the FaceTime framework to Apple TV and HomePod, the operating system that runs the HomePod Mini and the Apple TV. It's adding the FaceTime framework. And so that could point to devices that have screens and microphones on them in the future from Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll have hidden humidity sensors in them too.
That's the main update that this story is then tied into, is that there's FaceTime and iMessage frameworks tied into some of the betas. And so that does imply that there's some sort of FaceTime type support coming to Apple TV and or wait, is it just Apple TV or was it also on the HomePod? I mean, okay, so
HomePod is essentially Apple TV software. So it's coming to both Apple TV and HomePod, because HomePod OS is running a version of Apple TV, of tvOS.
I do think that's an important concept or context also, because this does seem like it went a couple of steps really quickly to that. But also just that the idea, at least the example version, they took a HomePod Mini and stretched it out, and then on the top where the icon or the controls are, they put a screen facing upwards. So I can almost guarantee that there's zero chance that the HomePod would look anything like this. This is just like a rendering, and then that'll make you click and talk about it, because I think it's absurd. I mean, not to like whatever to the artist. I'm sure they just
no, they have to know it's absurd too. That's just a funny haha. When really it's going to look more like an iPad in front. Like, just can you show Kevin the Echo Show? I think it's the Echo Show 10. The most recent Echo Show. It looks like a HomePod with an iPad kind of on the front, angled a little bit backward. Yeah, the Echo Show 10, which follows you around the room with a camera so that you can talk while you move around. That's what it's going to look like. Let's be real. If this is a real thing.
If this is a real thing at all. Yeah, just to be clear too. So I think the reason I wanted to mention this also was just to give some context to the HomePod biggie dying last week, because it does seem like likely what's going to happen is it's one of those where like the original HomePod had to die so that whatever came to replace it can have room to live. And so I think it's just...
Are you saying the HomePod had to walk so the HomePod TV can run?
Exactly. The HomePod TV. Oh my God. Oh, that is the word. Weren't we even talking about how the HomePod name itself, when it first came out, was like, what?
Yeah, it's bonkers. Yeah.
So I think this is just cool to have that inkling of hope anymore. No, I'm trying being very dramatic now, but it is just like, this would be I'd say this is an acceptable replacement for what the HomePod could be, especially if it was still sounding decent. And then maybe they just leave the higher end speakers to other companies, or maybe you can have that free HomePod Biggie idea. Otherwise, I think it's just interesting to see. And also the other smart home angle of just, if there was some sort of FaceTime via Apple TV, like that would be awesome if we could have some sort of Apple camera on the top of the TV and it could handle all the routing, or you could just use your AirPods or something like that. Or a HomePod could distinguish the audio. That would be great too. So I'm all for the old smart home dying for the new smart home to run, and just mix those, of course. But
death and running,
especially with Thread too. That is like a larger story. So yeah. HomePod never had Thread. That could have been a major issue for it.
All right. Oh, this is another awesome story. I've talked before about one of the super cool features of Android in general is the automatic live captioning that Android has available across kind of anything that you're listening to. As long as it uses the media player properly, then you can add captioning. Well, Chrome on Mac has added this feature whenever you are playing media through the device. So a new Chrome update has added this so that you can also enable captions just by turning them on in your settings. I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I just love seeing this kind of, it's like, I use closed captions on TV all the time. So seeing this everywhere is great. I don't even think I've ever looked at whether or not, I mean, I assume Mac itself, it does talk about how Mac is using this. So I've never thought about using captions on the Mac, but I can't tell if the Mac one just works within sources that have it available versus this does sound like Chrome is closed captioning anything that you use. So I got to test this out more, but it's very cool to see.
There we go. Oh boy. Aqara. I don't know. I got to give this an F for the headline. Aqara's vibration sensor has some good vibrations. The idea here is that you would install it on something that you are trying to determine is running based on vibration. So as they show a washing machine, for example. So you stick this on, it's $19.19, and it lets you determine if something that it's connected to is vibrating. And when it stops vibrating, then it lets you know that it stopped vibrating. So then you know to go get your laundry and move it to the dryer, or whatever you happen to be using it for. The iMore article also shows it kind of in a drawer. So maybe you've got a secret drawer with secret stuff inside. Yeah, you don't want people peeping in. Or you could attach it to the presents closet that you have where you keep your end of the year presents. Whatever it happens to be, this little vibration sensor can help you with that. But the big question is, does it support Thread? Because if it's just Bluetooth.
Sure. Yeah, but it is still, this is just interesting because I just remember Rosemary talking about this the end of last year, where she had done I just didn't even know that there was a vibration sensor at the time. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to mention this review again. But I linked to it. We can link to it in the show notes. But on Automators, episode 63, she has some she's just got amazing ones where it'll automatically detect when it's off or the laundry is done and things like that.
Oh,
so I thought this is
okay. This is it's probably Zigbee because there's a hub.
Oh, okay. That is worth mentioning. But yeah,
but that's good.
I just thought this is a cool, the drawer thing, that was automating a drawer. I could go too far with that. And so I may just.
Oh, cool. There's the Aqara Aqara, I don't know, the Aqara Cube, which is a remote. You push, shake, rotate, tap twice, flip, or flip 180 degrees or flip 90 degrees, and all of those can do different automations.
Yeah, well, nice. I didn't know about that one either. Yeah, there are definitely...
Wow, they make a lot.
I think more experimental products like this that solve very specific niches, but once you have it, it's like you can't do something like that otherwise. So I think this is a neat
Zigbee.
one. This next one is not as approachable.
Tell me
the
about
Sonos professional installment story. So,
oh yeah, I saw this story. So what's going on here? Somebody said, "Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to install Sonos Architectural. These not lights. Wow, these speakers from Sonos. See, I'm afraid of Sonos. I'm afraid they're going to do me wrong. So I don't think I can invest the kind of money that a Sonos architectural system requires."
It is very fascinating to just personally think about my opinion of Sonos 2 weeks ago and now because of the HomePod, like falling out, the market falling out from underneath it. I wasn't super impressed when Sonos started doing like 2-for-1 sales on their products, because as a luxury brand, that does always seem out of line, that they seemed pretty desperate at the time. But maybe it has just proven that people bought those instead of the HomePods. And Sonos is still around and kicking. And this is an interesting article that always talks about, it's just, the premise is that it's not as expensive as you would think, but then it ends up being like $3,000 to get Sonos professionally installed in your house. But I did just forget that this was even an option. These are the recessed ceiling and wall speaker situation where, and then you have a whole hub in the middle that you can control it all your devices plug into also. So it's actually just an interesting, I don't know, like this is still the ultimate luxury setup. He said the premise was that it's not just for people who have mansions, but again, thousands of dollars on speakers is a lot. And then just the good example too is when you have to have these little single speakers floating around with other systems. And so when it actually is in the wall, that can be a difference or a deal breaker for you at your house. So I just thought this was an interesting, I don't usually think about this part of Sonos. So if you're out there looking for a really nice Sonos type setup, you can get a professional installation installed in your walls as well.
Cha-ching!
I got to do a review unit if they like.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is nice. CNET has put together some smart home routines for beginners. So if you're kind of wanting to figure out how to take your smart home to the next level with automations, because that's really where you want to get in the end, is having the smart home just kind of work for you. CNET has put together 4 that will help you get things rolling.
Yeah. And these are, like they mentioned, it's pretty basic. So morning, leave for work, leave for vacation, good night kind of thing. But I wanted to mention this too, because I just want people to tell us what they have in their automations, like those situations like this. And so let us know in feedback if you've got any good routines, like what's your good night routine, or I think everybody knows about the morning routine one, so that is great. But also if you have more unique situations, those are the kinds that I always like to pinpoint, because then people can take those and use them for themselves. So definitely let us know what your smart home routine moments are, and we can talk about them in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing that. All right. Up next, our picks of the week. It's time for our picks of the week. Matthew Cassinelli, what have you picked out for us?
This is a new simple Mac app from Harshil Shah, who I hope I said his name right. But it's a Mac app that is called Pause, and it just reminds you every once in a while to look away from your computer screen, because I do think this is maybe built from his development experience. Sometimes it can be pretty easy to just get zoned into the computer and be staring at it for too long. And so I thought this was a great, I think it's always interesting that there's actually not a whole lot of automation stuff for the Mac in terms of your environment and things like that, probably because HomeKit is newer to it all. But I like this of just using your Mac smarter as well, because especially during times like this, people can end up being on their computers a lot more. So it's specifically about eye strain as well, and RSI, of look somewhere that's not 6 inches in front of your face and look 20 feet away and stretch your eyes out and things like that. So good little free app. What about yours?
Yeah, it's free. I love that. Free is good. Mine is not free, but it is one of the best prices that you can get for a smart bulb. And you're going to be surprised that it comes from this company, because Nanoleaf is known for being kind of pricey. Nanoleaf makes the very cool tiles and hexagons and light panels and all these other kinds of things. But Nanoleaf started selling its Nanoleaf Essentials devices. And those include a smart bulb and light strips, the A19 bulb. And you can get it for $20. This bulb is Bluetooth for those of you who are living in the past. And I kid, but it is. It's Bluetooth for kind of non-thread homes, or thread for thread homes. And it goes up to 1100 lumens max brightness. It goes anywhere from 2700 to 6500 K for the white color temperature, or for the white light. And then it has, however many 16 million plus colors for the colors that are available. And what am I trying to remember? Oh, it of course works with Apple's HomeKit platform. And so if you want to use Thread and you want to check out Thread, these Nanoleaf bulbs are a great place to start. Given that they are mains powered, as Tim had talked about earlier, that also makes them potential border routers, or routers, I should say, not border routers, but routers, meaning that if I have a Nanoleaf Essentials bulb in my living room, it can act as a router for some of those endpoint devices that exist in my home, like the contact sensor that's at my door. And so it helps bridge all of the different parts of the network together. I've got 2 of these bulbs, and so they communicate with one another and communicate with the HomePod Mini, and it all just connects up together. And these things are so fast to respond, which I'm not used to if it's not Hue, if it's, some other bulb that is using either Bluetooth or is using Wi-Fi, and it's not Hue, which is using Zigbee, Hue's own special version of that, then I do have issues getting them to work properly or to be super quick to respond. These are very responsive, and at $20 from a company that makes one of the most well-designed and interesting products, the Nanoleaf panels that they have, I'm very happy with it. And yeah, if you can go back to the photo, they're kind of a faceted design. The idea is that even if you don't have to necessarily put them inside of a lampshade or something like that. They make them so that they can kind of be displayed on Nanoleaf's own site. They have weird kind of like hanging from a plug in an outlet or something like that. It's just sort of artsy fartsy, but not my style. I do have mine inside of lampshades, but they make it, like I said, with that faceted design. So especially if you've got like in the kitchen, where a lot of times if there is some sort of shade over the light, it's all glass and you can see through it. These bulbs don't just look like basic boring bulbs. They actually have kind of a cool look to them. And then along with being thread enabled, they also support Apple's adaptive lighting protocol, or adaptive lighting feature, I should say. And so that allows them to be, to sort of change white color over the day, to change color temperature over the course of the day. and then also change color temperature based on how bright you have the light. On Nanoleaf's own site, they are out of stock of both the Essentials bulb and the Essentials light strip, but Apple's own site, which is where I purchased them from, they were still in stock there. I was able to get them from Apple's site. Oh no, it looks like they're out of stock now too. So I just got in there. Maybe I bought the last 2 that were available. So yeah, Nanoleaf can't create these fast enough. Looks like the Essentials light strip is still in stock. So you are able to get that. I got one of those too because I wanted to see how it worked with Thread. And one of the unique things about Nanoleaf's light strip is that it has a remote kind of built into it. Most of them, they only work over Wi-Fi, but this has a little remote that you can press the button to turn it on and off, to change the color temperature and brightness, and sort of cycle through different color changes that you have. So I really liked that unique feature of this, which was different from the others. So yeah, lots of good stuff from Nanoleaf right now. But those Nanoleaf bulbs, if you're wanting to check out Thread and see how responsive Thread can be, download the Eve app, maybe pick up a few of Eve's new products, and then also consider getting these bulbs from Nanoleaf, which they just work. It just works over Thread. It's so nice. I love it. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of another episode of Smart Tech Today. Of course, we did not get to answer questions today because we had an awesome interview. But if you do have questions for us, you can send those to stt@twit.tv. That way we can answer them on a future episode. Or if you have a project that you want help with, want some ideas. I just saw a really cool one about smart home bankruptcy. So we'll see what's going on there. Basically kind of starting things over from fresh, not declaring bankruptcy because you bought too much smart home stuff. Don't worry. Of course, if you are out there watching live, we appreciate you. You out there can tune in live every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, which is 1:30 p.m. Pacific, by going to twit.tv/STT. By going to twit.tv/live, where we've got all the different live streams that we do. But the best way to get the show is by subscribing. And you do that by going to twit.tv/STT and subscribing in any of the various places we have available in audio and video formats: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, etc., etc., etc. Matthew Cassinelli, if folks want to follow you online and check out your work, where do they go to do that?
You can go to matthewcassinelli.com/Siri shortcuts to see my latest collection. I just added a clipboard manager shortcut so that you can copy and paste text and then have stored over time on iOS. So pretty nice. What about you?
I am at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to many of the places I exist online. All righty, Matthew, it is time to say goodnight to your smart assistants over Thread.
Let's end this thread.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Itprotv, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands-On Photography, here on Twit TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.